14 hours, 6 burning ships, and one of the most important waterways on Earth. But the real question isn't how the ships were attacked. It's how it happened after Iran's navy was supposedly destroyed. Because what unfolded in the Persian Gulf that day may reveal a strategy capable of shaking global oil markets, shipping routes, and the balance of power at sea. And the most dangerous part of that strategy is only just beginning. For most of the world, the Persian Gulf is just a stretch of water on a map. But for the global economy, it is something very different. It is one of the most important trade corridors on Earth. Every single day, enormous tankers move through this narrow body of water, carrying oil from the Middle East to the rest of the world. Nearly 1/5 of the planet's daily oil supply travels through a single gateway there, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow passage connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. At its tightest point, it is only about 33 kilometers wide. Through this corridor pass hundreds of ships every week: oil tankers, cargo vessels, container ships, and fuel carriers. These vessels carry the energy that powers cities, factories, and transportation systems across the globe. Because of this, stability in the Strait of Hormuz is critical. When ships move safely through the strait, global markets remain calm. When something goes wrong there, the effects spread across the entire world. On the 13th day of an escalating conflict in the region, something did go wrong. Within a period of just 14 hours, 6 commercial vessels were attacked across the waters of the Persian Gulf. The attacks did not target warships or military fleets. Instead, they struck civilian shipping, the infrastructure of global trade itself. The first reports came from Iraqi waters near the country's major oil export terminals. 2 fuel tankers operating in the area suddenly erupted into flames after explosive drone boats collided with their hulls at the waterline. Crew members reported that the vessels had little warning before the impact. Emergency signals were sent immediately. Rescue teams rushed toward the burning ships, while thick columns of smoke rose into the sky above the Gulf. Fires continued to burn for hours. Iraqi authorities confirmed that 1 crew member had died during the incident. 25 others were pulled from the water by rescue teams responding to distress calls. As emergency operations continued, more reports began arriving. Other vessels across the Gulf had also been attacked within the same time window. Cargo ships and container vessels reported damage after similar explosive devices struck their hulls. None of these ships were military targets. They were commercial vessels, moving goods and fuel through one of the world's busiest maritime routes. The attacks stretched across hundreds of kilometers of water, from near the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz all the way toward Iraq's major oil terminals near Basra. In total, 6 ships had been struck in just 14 hours. For global shipping companies, the message was immediate and alarming. The Persian Gulf had suddenly become unpredictable. Within hours, Iraqi authorities announced that operations at nearby oil terminals would be temporarily suspended while the situation was assessed. Tanker captains waiting to load cargo were instructed to delay departure. Some ships already sailing toward the region began reconsidering whether to enter the Gulf at all, but the effects of the attacks did not stop at the water's edge. Across the global shipping industry, companies that ensure maritime trade began to react. These organizations play a crucial role in global commerce. Without insurance coverage, many ships cannot legally operate. Insurers evaluate risks constantly: storms, piracy, accidents, and political instability. Now they faced a new calculation. If explosive drone boats could strike ships anywhere in the Gulf, then the risk level had suddenly changed. Even a small chance of attack could make insurance coverage extremely expensive or impossible. Within days, several major maritime insurance groups announced that they would no longer provide coverage for vessels traveling through the Persian Gulf under normal terms. Instead, ships entering the region would face dramatically higher insurance costs. For shipping companies, this created a difficult decision. A tanker carrying millions of barrels of oil is an extremely valuable asset. Losing one ship could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Even if the vessel survived an attack, the damage could disrupt supply chains for weeks. Some companies chose to wait. Others began rerouting ships where possible, even if it meant longer journeys and higher fuel costs. Meanwhile, energy markets around the world started reacting to the news. Oil traders watched the situation closely, knowing that even a temporary disruption in Gulf shipping could push prices upward. The Strait of Hormuz was not just a regional passage, it was a global economic pressure point. But the attacks also raised a deeper strategic question. In recent weeks, military reports had claimed that Iran's conventional naval forces had suffered severe losses. Several warships had reportedly been destroyed during the earlier operations. Some political leaders even declared that Iran's navy had been effectively neutralized. Yet the events of those 14 hours suggested something very different. 6 ships had been attacked without a traditional fleet. No large warships were involved. No major naval battle had taken place. Instead, small explosive drone boats had appeared on the surface of the water, struck their targets, and disappeared. For military analysts watching the situation, the pattern was not random. It reflected a strategy that had been developing quietly for years. A strategy designed specifically for a place like the Persian Gulf. Because in a narrow waterway, crowded with commercial ships, massive aircraft carriers and destroyers are not always the most important weapons at sea. Sometimes, the most disruptive threat can come from something much smaller. And what happened during those 14 hours suggested that the real naval strategy behind the attacks was only beginning to reveal itself. For decades, naval power has usually meant the same thing: large warships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, massive fleets designed to control the open ocean. Countries like the United States, China, and the United Kingdom built their naval strategies around these powerful ships. Aircraft carriers alone can carry dozens of fighter jets and thousands of sailors. A single carrier strike group can project military power across entire regions. But Iran never tried to build a navy like that. Iran's military planners understood a simple reality: competing directly with the world's most powerful navies would be impossible. The cost of building and maintaining large fleets was far beyond Iran's resources. Even if Iran had attempted to build such ships, they would likely have been destroyed quickly in a direct conflict. So instead of copying the traditional model of naval warfare, Iran designed something very different. They built a navy that was never meant to fight a conventional battle. This strategy began developing in the late 1980s after a series of clashes between Iranian and American forces in the Persian Gulf. During those confrontations, several Iranian warships were destroyed in a matter of hours. The lesson for Iran's military leadership was clear: large ships were easy targets. From that moment forward, Iran's naval doctrine began to shift. Instead of investing heavily in large surface vessels, Iran focused on building what military analysts call asymmetric capabilities. Asymmetric warfare means using smaller, cheaper, and less predictable tools to challenge a much stronger opponent. Rather than matching the enemy's strength, the goal is to attack their weaknesses. In the case of the Persian Gulf, Iran realized that geography itself offered a powerful advantage. Unlike the open ocean, the Gulf is a confined space. It is relatively shallow, heavily trafficked, and surrounded by coastlines that are never far away. Large naval formations cannot maneuver freely there the way they can in the open sea. And most importantly, commercial shipping lanes are fixed. Oil tankers and cargo vessels cannot simply choose random routes. They must follow established corridors to avoid shallow waters and navigational hazards. This predictability creates opportunities. Iran's naval planners began building a force specifically designed to operate inside this environment. Instead of relying on traditional warships, they invested in systems that could operate close to shore and strike quickly. One of the most important elements of this strategy is the use of fast attack craft. These small boats are far cheaper and easier to produce than large warships. They can move quickly through the narrow waters of the Gulf and operate in large numbers. But the real transformation came with the development of unmanned maritime systems. Remote-controlled drone boats, small vessels packed with explosives, became a key part of Iran's strategy. These boats can travel across the surface of the water at high speed and detonate when they reach a target. Because they are unmanned, they do not risk the lives of sailors. They are also extremely inexpensive compared to the defensive systems used to stop them. A modern missile interceptor can cost millions of dollars. A small explosive drone boat may cost only a tiny fraction of that. This creates a powerful imbalance. Defending against dozens of small threats can quickly become more expensive than launching them. Iran also invested heavily in another tool: naval mines. Mines are simple devices placed underwater along shipping routes. Some float at depth, waiting for ships to pass above them. Others rest on the seabed. They are difficult to detect and even harder to remove quickly. In a narrow waterway like the Strait of Hormuz, even a small number of mines can create massive uncertainty. Shipping companies may refuse to send vessels through waters where mines might exist. Insurance companies may refuse to cover those voyages. In this way, mines can disrupt shipping without a single explosion. Another key part of Iran's strategy is its network of coastal missile systems. These anti-ship missiles are positioned along Iran's coastline overlooking the Gulf. From these locations, they can target ships moving through the narrow maritime corridor. Unlike large naval fleets, these missile systems are difficult to eliminate completely. They can be hidden, moved, and redeployed along hundreds of kilometers of coastline. All of these elements combine into a strategy designed for one specific goal: not to defeat powerful navies in battle, but to make the Persian Gulf too dangerous for normal shipping operations. This approach changes the rules of naval conflict. Instead of focusing on large fleet engagements, the strategy targets the economic systems that depend on the Gulf's shipping lanes. Tankers, cargo vessels, and container ships become the pressure points of global trade. A small attack on one ship can cause insurance costs to rise. Several attacks can make shipping companies hesitate to enter the region at all. And if enough uncertainty spreads through the market, the entire flow of global energy can begin to slow down. What happened during those 14 hours was not simply a series of isolated attacks. It was a demonstration of how this asymmetric naval strategy can operate in practice. 6 ships were struck without the presence of a traditional fleet. No massive naval battle took place. No carrier groups exchanged fire. Instead, Small unmanned boats appeared in the shipping lanes, delivered their explosive payloads, and vanished. For analysts watching the situation unfold, the pattern revealed something important. Iran's naval power was never designed to survive a conventional war at sea. It was designed to make the Gulf itself the battlefield. And if that battlefield becomes unstable enough, even the most powerful navies in the world may struggle to keep global trade moving safely through it. The implications of that strategy reach far beyond the Gulf. Because when shipping stops in the Strait of Hormuz, the shock does not stay there. It spreads through oil markets, supply chains, and economies across the entire planet. Wars are often imagined as clashes between armies and fleets. Tanks move across land, warships exchange missiles at sea, fighter jets dominate the sky. But the events unfolding around the Persian Gulf reveal a different kind of battlefield. In this conflict, the most important targets are not military bases or naval fleets. They are the arteries of global commerce, oil tankers, cargo ships, insurance contracts, energy markets. Because in the modern world, disrupting trade can sometimes be more powerful than winning a battle. To understand why, it is necessary to understand how the global energy system works. Every day, enormous quantities of oil leave the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates all export energy through the Persian Gulf. Tankers loaded with millions of barrels move slowly through the Strait of Hormuz before heading toward Asia, Europe, and other parts of the world. For countries like China, Japan, South Korea, and India, these shipments are essential. Their industries depend on stable oil supplies arriving on time. Even small disruptions can create ripple effects through entire economies. That is why the Strait of Hormuz is considered one of the most critical choke points in global trade. If ships cannot pass safely through that narrow corridor, energy markets immediately react. When the attacks on 6 ships were reported, traders around the world began watching the situation closely. Oil markets are extremely sensitive to risk. Prices are influenced not only by actual supply, but also by expectations about the future. If traders believe that shipping through the Gulf may become dangerous, they begin adjusting their positions. The result is volatility. Oil prices can rise quickly as buyers attempt to secure supplies before the situation worsens. Governments begin considering emergency reserves. Energy companies reevaluate their shipping schedules. But the economic consequences extend beyond oil prices alone. Modern maritime trade depends heavily on insurance. Every commercial ship traveling through international waters must be insured against accidents, damage, or loss. Without insurance, shipping companies cannot operate. Ports may refuse to accept vessels that lack coverage. This means insurance markets play a quiet but powerful role in global trade. When a region becomes unstable, insurers reassess the risks involved. If attacks on ships become possible, the cost of coverage rises sharply. Sometimes the increase is manageable. Other times, insurers simply withdraw from the region altogether. This is exactly what began happening after the attacks in the Gulf. Major maritime insurance organizations began reviewing the security situation. If explosive drone boats could strike ships across hundreds of kilometers of water, the risk profile of the entire region had changed. Insuring vessels traveling through those waters suddenly became extremely complicated. Without reliable insurance, tanker captains face a difficult decision. Sailing into a dangerous region could risk the ship, the cargo, and the lives of the crew. Even if the vessel survives, damage could lead to months of repairs and massive financial losses. As uncertainty spreads, shipping companies begin delaying voyages. Some tankers remain anchored outside the Gulf waiting for clearer information. Others attempt to reroute shipments where possible, but alternative routes are often much longer and far more expensive. For global supply chains, delays accumulate quickly. Refineries waiting for oil deliveries begin adjusting production schedules. Industrial buyers look for alternative suppliers. Governments begin preparing contingency plans. In this way, a small number of maritime attacks can trigger economic consequences far beyond the immediate area. This is where the concept of strategic asymmetry becomes especially important. The cost of building and launching a small explosive drone boat is relatively low. It requires basic materials, navigation systems, and explosives. But the financial consequences of disrupting a major shipping corridor can reach billions of dollars. Each tanker delayed represents millions of barrels of oil not reaching its destination. Each increase in insurance costs adds pressure to global transportation networks. And each rise in oil prices affects industries around the world, from airlines and shipping companies to factories and electricity producers. This imbalance between cost and impact lies at the center of the strategy. Instead of trying to defeat a stronger military opponent directly, the goal becomes creating instability within the economic system that opponent depends on. If enough uncertainty exists, markets begin reacting on their own. Companies hesitate. Insurers withdraw. Prices fluctuate. The disruption spreads without the need for continuous attacks. Meanwhile, another layer of complexity emerges within global energy politics. Despite international sanctions, Iran has continued exporting oil through alternative networks. Some shipments move through complex logistical arrangements involving privately operated tankers and indirect trade routes. Certain buyers, particularly in Asia, continue purchasing Iranian crude through channels that operate outside the reach of Western financial systems. As global oil prices rise due to instability in the Gulf, the value of these shipments increases. This creates a paradox. While some parts of the global energy market experience disruption, others adapt and continue functioning through alternative pathways. For analysts observing the situation, this dynamic reveals a deeper strategic calculation. The attacks on commercial vessels are not simply acts of destruction. They are signals directed toward the global economic system itself, signals that shipping routes may no longer be secure, signals that insurance markets may need to reconsider their assumptions, signals that the cost of operating in the Persian Gulf could rise dramatically. And when enough actors in the global economy respond to those signals, the effects multiply far beyond the initial incident. Because in a world built on interconnected trade networks, even a small disruption at a critical choke point can spread across continents. What began as 6 attacks within 14 hours is now influencing decisions made in trading floors, corporate boardrooms, and government ministries around the world. And as these economic pressures build, a much larger question begins to emerge. Not simply who attacked the ships, but who truly controls the waters through which the world's most important energy corridor must pass. On most world maps, the Strait of Hormuz appears almost insignificant, a narrow blue line between Iran and Oman, just another passage connecting one body of water to another. But in reality, that thin corridor may be one of the most strategically powerful locations on Earth, because through that narrow stretch of water flows the energy that powers much of the global economy. Every day, dozens of massive tankers move slowly through the strait, carrying oil and liquefied natural gas toward markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. Together, these shipments account for nearly 20% of the world's daily oil consumption. This means that a disruption in the Strait of Hormuz does not remain a regional issue. It becomes a global one. The events surrounding the attacks on commercial ships raised an uncomfortable question for military planners and global markets alike. Who actually controls this critical waterway? At first glance, the answer might appear simple. The United States Navy maintains one of the most powerful maritime forces in the world. Aircraft carriers, guided missile destroyers, and submarines operate across the region. These ships possess extraordinary capabilities. An aircraft carrier alone can launch dozens of fighter aircraft, capable of striking targets hundreds of kilometers away. Destroyers equipped with advanced radar systems can track incoming threats and intercept missiles. From a distance, this naval power seems overwhelming, but controlling a waterway is not the same as projecting power into it. Large naval vessels operate most effectively in open ocean environments, where they have space to maneuver. The geometry of defense becomes easier when ships can maintain distance from potential threats. The Persian Gulf does not offer those advantages. Instead, it presents a confined and complex environment. The water is relatively shallow. Commercial shipping lanes are tightly packed. Coastlines remain close on both sides. Within such narrow corridor, large ships become more vulnerable. Naval mines can be hidden along the seabed. Small drone boats can approach at low radar signatures. Coastal missile systems positioned along the shoreline can threaten ships moving through predictable routes. In these conditions, even powerful fleets must operate carefully. This reality explains why many of the largest warships in the region remain positioned outside the strait itself, often operating in the Arabian Sea rather than inside the narrow passage. From there, they can launch aircraft and conduct operations without exposing themselves to the full range of asymmetric threats present within the Gulf. But this creates a strategic gap. Projecting power from outside the strait allows for strikes against military targets, yet it does not guarantee that commercial shipping can move safely through the waterway itself. And for global trade, safe passage is the entire point. The attacks on 6 commercial vessels highlighted this problem clearly. Even without large naval battles, uncertainty had spread through the region's shipping networks. Insurance companies reconsidered their policies. Shipping companies delayed voyages. Oil markets reacted to the possibility of further disruptions. None of this required a complete closure of the strait. Instead, the strategy relied on uncertainty. If enough risk exists, ships may simply choose not to enter. This principle has long been recognized by military strategists. A choke point does not need to be physically blocked to become effectively unusable. It only needs to become dangerous enough that normal traffic stops. In the Strait of Hormuz, that threshold can be surprisingly low. A few confirmed attacks, the possibility of naval mines, the presence of unmanned explosive vessels. Together, these factors can create hesitation across the entire shipping industry, and hesitation alone can slow the movement of energy across global markets. At the same time, competing narratives emerge. Some governments emphasize the continued presence of powerful naval forces in the region. They highlight successful defensive operations and ongoing patrols. Others emphasize the vulnerability of commercial shipping and the risks posed by asymmetric threats. Both perspectives contain elements of truth. Large navies still possess overwhelming firepower. Aircraft carriers and destroyers remain capable of conducting complex operations across vast distances. Yet the narrow geography of the Gulf creates a different type of challenge, one where technological superiority alone may not guarantee control. In this environment, perception becomes as important as reality. If shipping companies believe the route is unsafe, trade slows. If insurers believe the risk is too high, voyages become financially impossible. And if enough uncertainty spreads through the system, the global economy begins to feel the consequences. This is why the struggle over the Strait of Hormuz is not only a military contest, it is also an information battle. Every statement released by governments, every satellite image shared with the public, every report of an attack influences how companies and markets interpret the situation. Control of the narrative can shape the behavior of traders, insurers, and shipping companies. And that behavior ultimately determines whether tankers continue moving through the world's most critical energy corridor. What happened during those 14 hours demonstrated how fragile that corridor can become. 6 ships were attacked. Insurance markets reacted. Global energy traders began recalculating risk. And the question of who truly controls the Strait of Hormuz became more complicated than ever before. Because in a narrow waterway where global trade depends on stability, control is not always defined by the largest fleet. Sometimes it is defined by who can make the water feel unsafe.